We're back live, Golden Black Live for segment 3. One of my favorite people in the whole wide world. I had Elliot Bloom before the second segment, and certainly Dr. Will Miller needs no introduction. He has been a regular on our show at least once or twice a year. And there has never been a more time, maybe in the modern history of the world, than a need for reasonableness with an attention on mental health and taking care of oneself. Will's a big sports fan, so we'll get into that too. But just put that a little bit into context of what your role has been, and you're having to serve others, but you have to serve yourself too. This has been a big challenge for everybody.
Absolutely. And of course, it's almost the perfect storm. I mean, obviously, being a therapist in mental health, and especially given the fact that not only do I teach at Purdue, but also that I am the stress and mental health consultant for law enforcement in the area. The combination of the Black Lives Matter eruption, as well as just the routine stresses of law enforcement. And everybody is really kind of on edge right now. It's difficult. But as you and I have spoken about, we've been pretty impressed that, it seems like Purdue has swept the details about as well as it can be done. So you're just hoping that it's what I'm dealing with, Alan. And let me just say this, and I hope this is really useful to your audience. I've been doing a lot of webinars, obviously, because in addition to individual practice, people want to know, what is the state of the art for coping with the reaction to this? And let me just indulge me here. If you think about your mood, mood is a spectrum. It can go from one end, like depression, all the way kind of sinking down, all the way up to anxiety. I mean, and then out of control there. Most of us are struggling somewhere in the middle. But anyone can pretty much tell you if they are inclined by personality and temperament. Oh, I tend to be a little bit more anxious. I tend to be a little more depressed. And so these stressors right now kind of pull you in that native direction. So what I've been doing is trying to bring the state of the art in the neuroscience of how you cope. We know more about anxiety than anything. And what are the strategies that are working for people to at least abate some of your symptomology, because that's what you can do right now. And I'm happy to share all of that stuff.
Yeah, and it's extremely important message right now, whether we're dealing with things that that matter but don't really matter, like whether they're going to play college football or all these kinds of things. It still is this is something that everybody is dealing with, and that is unique.
One of the things that's really interesting, and especially working with the police, of course, the police officers with their training kind of step in and know kind of what they're doing. But my practice has also involved some of the fears of their family, the spouses, et cetera, who are not in control. I think about the athletes. In other words, the students all gung-ho to play football. Well, how are the moms and dads doing? How are the sisters and brothers doing with, oh boy, I hope this is the right, because when you don't have control, when control is sort of taken from you, that is not only antithetical to a strong go-getter athlete, but it's very, very difficult for others who are sort of in charge of caregiving for these people. And so it is, like I said, the perfect storm of losing control. But as I said, there are lots of tools. And if you'd like, I can just sort of review what the state of the art is right now. Let's talk about anxiety. Anxiety basically is an elevation of your system. Okay, think about a car engine idling too high. What do we know about that? Well, some of these, and you can imagine, they're used to me by now, the cops, but when I would say to them, what really would help is if you would meditate. They go, yeah, sure. But they believe me now. I mean, I get to them. And let me explain what meditation is, because people confuse it with prayer, with Eastern stuff. Forget all that. The noisiest part of your brain is right here in the frontal cortex. It's always looking out, planning stuff. All of the professors, the students, the athletes, the administrators, everybody's doing that. Meditation is simply a practice to give this, as I say to them, to shut your yapper and just quiet down. And it is amazing the accumulating impact that has to recover your breath, etc. Being outside, being in physical nature is also really, really critical. And of course, I run into a lot of people who seem to be Zoom phobic. It's like, oh, they hate Zoom. But something, in the meantime, kind of get over that. Just look at faces, the power of a smiling face back at you. has great impact on you psychologically, going both ways. And so, as a matter of fact, when the police department sent me to become a certified trauma specialist, I had to do a deep dive into PTSD.
Yeah.
And the guru of this is an amazing guy from Harvard named Bessel van der Kolk. He wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is like the Bible about what research tells us about PTSD. And he said, contrary to what you might think, overcoming trauma, you don't start with talking about the incident. You start with helping your body to rest. And he said, you know what has proven the most effective, and slowly but surely police officers are doing this, is yoga.
Yeah.
Yoga is having a profound impact on just resting your body so that you can come to grips with what's bothering you. So you have to adjust to the lifestyle you have. If you're an athlete on campus, well, you have to follow the protocols, but reassure your parents. Contact them a lot. Be in touch with the people who are worried about you. And don't just give the benign, oh, everything's fine, Mom, we're doing it. No, fill them in so you help and give them a gift of relaxing some of their angst, okay? So this is a two-way street of protecting yourself and caring for each other. And what is a message that's more important than that in athletics? That's the whole mantra, is the team, the connection, the care for each other. And I'm just so impressed by the staff at Purdue, and the ones I've come in contact with and have gotten to know, and they all really have the well-being of their students first in their heart. And so I'm guardedly optimistic we'll get through this. One last thing that I think is something of hope, and that is, it seems like while we're waiting for like a vaccine or whatever, there are steps being taken now to mitigate the impact if you get this. And that's a big, big help, is if you get tested positively, you don't have to have this dread fear that you're just going to go down the rabbit hole with that. So I'm very busy.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that. And you find every friend and every associate that you've ever known, and your network's pretty large. So I'm sure that part has been a constant for you since the middle of March. And your lovely bride Sally too does so much in that area, whether it be grief counseling but also just trying to kind of stabilize this. You're one of your famous best sayings is "it will be well," and that sometimes is hard to believe. To be very honest, right now, and I think that's been a real challenge for people. I mean, in terms of being able to know, to quiet themselves to a point to say, we can get through this.
Right. Slowing your engine down is what facilitates. Now, on the other end, I must give a statement that for those of you out there who also are in contact with spouses, roommates, friends, whatever, and you notice that they are not sort of the anxious type and they're really kind of withdrawing, don't take that for granted, because depression is also a real risk here for people who feel overwhelmed by this. And it's very important to reach out and kind of pull them in and pull them back, because that's kind of if someone's anxious, you know it,
yeah,
because they behave it. If someone's depressed, it's easy to make them invisible, and that can be very risky for them. And so, talk to people, smile at them, ask them questions. I did a series of webinars for the entire School of Engineering at Purdue. I did multiple ones. And one of the things that I told them was that, look, if one of your roommates seems to be really withdrawn, try and channel your inner therapist, your inner shrink, and say, gee, I notice that you're really sleeping a lot, that you're withdrawing. Are you doing okay? Would it be helpful if we went out, took a walk or something like that? Just kind of get into it, because that really helps with depression, is for someone to initiate wanting to make contact with you to kind of get your engine restarted, okay? We'll get through this. And of course, most of us, I think also, Alan, have, and I know that this is so important to you and Amy, my little sister Amy, is that we come out of this reformed. In other words, that we elevate our character nationally and individually, that we learn something from this that going forward makes us more, compassionate and forgiving and interested in the other. Because that's, I think, what's needed right now in our culture that's obviously very self-focused and narcissistic. We've known that for a long time. It's time to turn that around and reach out and serve.
Yeah, I think it's a great message. One of the things in your previous life, and you still do it some, and that's stand-up comedy and and being in front of an audience. And I wonder, from your perspective, I just am kind of, because Purdue football is going to be played in front of basically no audience, no fans. Now, obviously, television audience. Basketball likely to be the same. What's the thought process? For these guys are all performers. I mean, they're fueled by especially college kids, I think, are fueled by that feedback they get from the fans and the crowd. How do you see that, and what effect?
Well, I've been a stand-up for many, many years, as you know. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a stand-up routine tomorrow night at Pacific Theater. It's an outdoor in a parking lot. And that's kind of one of the new strategies for my stand-up friends, is going to drive-in theaters where you can perform live. And so that's helpful. And so I'll do that tomorrow night. And I had just finished writing a one-man show that I performed several times, and now it had to be kind of like put on hold. But it's the National Anxiety Tour with Dr. Will. And I talk all about all this stuff, but with humor and with fun. And so I'll do that tomorrow night. And yes, and a lot of my comedian friends are trying to find ways to make it happen. But you can find strategies to do that. And boy, do we need to laugh. Good heavens.
Yeah. Yeah. And you look at these guys that are playing, though, and they get that when they did if you were going to talk to a David Bell or a top star basketball player and say, you're not going to get that if you're playing in front of an empty gym. Are they going to need to refocus or get their feedback another way? Or how do you view that?
Alan, here's where I'm really out of my water, but I can tell you this: what's interesting as a sports fan, when I'm in the stands or in the arena or whatever, and I'm looking at these guys or these men or women, the vibe I get from afar is that their focus is not the crowd, very much so. It's internal. It is a very insulated, myopic view of the coach and the teammates, etc. And so when is it that they are cognizant of the crowd? After a basket, after a touchdown, after a tackle, after some event that sort of stops the action. Yeah. But those are few and far between. So I think these guys are going to be fine. It will probably have them double down on what does give them a rise, which is their skill set, their ability, etc. The crowds will come back at some point. But in the meantime, golf has done very well, actually, in this system with no fans, because although it's a singular sport, but again, if you go to basketball or football, it too really, for the individual athlete, from my observation, is that they are very much connected pretty solely to the internal structure of the team. They're cognizant of the coaches, they're cognizant of each other, of the other team, etc. But it's a very cordoned off psychological world that they're in, which is interesting. So it'd be interesting to talk to them, given that perspective, how they're feeling it. They miss it at moments.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they will, but they also are pretty adaptable. Okay, now tell our viewers and where people can find you on social media. You're all over the place, and if people want to do that.
Best thing to do is go to drwill.com, drwill.com, and I have a very active YouTube channel on mental health. It's free, and you can
excellent
subscribe.
Stuff.
Yeah, and I talk about, especially one last thing is that the training for therapists has really changed and grown in the past 10 years with the advance of neuroscience and brain imaging. We know how thinking changes your brain, and that's what we're into.
Yeah, and a very, 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 very important thing as we continue to navigate this through. So, Will, thanks so much. Always enjoy our time. And yes, we are going to get together before long. I promise you, the Karpicks and the Millers, it's always a treasure for us. Want to thank also our good friends at WLFI. Yannick worked with us today. He's been working with us the last couple of weeks. Of course, Gordon Jackson. We're having fun doing it this way. I kind of like this Zoom thing. I mean, even though it's nice to have that be in the studio, it's pretty darn easy doing it this way, and we appreciate them very much. Thank our sponsors, Triple X, and the folks, Greg and Carrie Ayersman, we appreciate them. State Farm agent Trent Johnson and Hilton Garden Inn, Tara Mason, the good folks at Hilton Garden Inn. We appreciate them, and of course the good folks at WLFI. Will, have a great weekend and week. Like I said, we'll look forward to talking to you soon. And for all of you out there, we appreciate your time. If you missed part of this, we'll have the replay up on the site here within the next hour or so. And we appreciate all that Gordon Jackson and company do to make that happen. So have a great week, everybody. Thanks for watching Golden Black Live. We'll be back next week, next Friday. That'll be September the 25th. Still a month away or so from the start of football season, but we'll have a lot to talk about then. So have a great week, everybody, and thank you.